Learning theory. It's simple. Got all that? No? Okay, maybe it's not that simple. The human brain's a pretty complicated thing, especially when it comes to understanding how our brains actually learn. In fact, people have been trying to figure out this learning thing for a long time now. But not this guy. These guys, and lots of other smart people since then. Psychologists, scientists, and educators have all taken a shot at adding to our understanding of how people learn. However, lots of things have changed over the years. We've moved from communicating information with these to communicating through these, and this evolution is having a big impact on learning. So, while we won't have time today to make sense of all of these theories of how we learn, what we are going to do is focus on understanding a little more about two of the more recent and promising additions to this map. We're going to explore two emergent theories that are striving to account for the big shifts that are happening in this new connected digital age. These two theories are called connectivism and community of inquiry. We'll briefly explore each theory, looking into their origins and some key features. Then we'll consider their applicability, and I'll discuss how these concepts resonate for me personally, both as a learning professional and student. First, let's look at the theory of connectivism. This is George Siemens. He's the originator of the connectivism theory, based on an article he first published back in 2004. He's currently a professor at the Center for Distance Education and a researcher with the Technology Enhanced Knowledge Research Institute at Athabasca University in Alberta, Canada. Ultimately, connectivism is about the connections made between individual nodes within a network. Siemens defines it this way. The starting point of connectivism is the individual. Personal knowledge is comprised of a network, which feeds into organizations and institutions, which in turn feed back into the network and then continue to provide learning to the individual. The cycle of knowledge development, personal to network to organization, allows learners to remain current in their field through the connections they have formed. Stephen Downes is a contemporary of Siemens and an important contributor to the fields of online learning and new media. Currently a senior researcher at the National Research Council of Canada, Downes defines connectivism this way. At its heart, connectivism is the thesis that knowledge is distributed across a network of connections, and therefore that learning consists of the ability to construct and traverse those networks. While still a relatively young and developing theory, there are several core features or principles that have been put forth at the foundation of connectivism. These include learning and knowledge rests in diversity of opinions. Learning is a process of connecting specialized nodes or information sources. Learning may reside in non-human appliances. Capacity to know is more critical than what is currently known. Nurturing and maintaining connections is needed to facilitate continual learning. Ability to see connections between fields, ideas, and concepts is a core skill. Currency, accurate, up-to-date knowledge, is the intent of all connectivist learning activities. Decision-making is itself a learning process. Next, we'll look at the community of inquiry learning model. The community of inquiry model was originally developed by three researchers at the University of Calgary, pictured here. These researchers were Garrison, Anderson, and Archer. Their Canadian Social Sciences and Humanities Research-funded project was called A Study of the Characteristics and Qualities of Text-Based Computer Conferencing for Educational Purposes. This project ran from 1997 to 2001. The theory, methodology, and instruments developed during this project have been described in several papers published in peer-reviewed journals and can all be accessed online at communitiesofinquiry.com. An educational community of inquiry is a group of individuals who collaboratively engage in purposeful critical discourse and reflective to construct personal meaning and confirm mutual understanding. The community of inquiry theoretical framework represents a process of creating a deep and meaningful collaborative learning experience through the development of these three interdependent elements: social, cognitive, and teaching presence. Let's look at each one. Social presence is the ability of participants to identify with the community, communicate purposefully in a trusting environment, and develop interpersonal relationships by way of projecting their individual personalities. Teaching presence is the design, facilitation, and direction of cognitive and social processes for the purpose of realizing personally meaningful and educationally worthwhile learning outcomes. Cognitive presence is the extent to which learners are able to construct and confirm meaning through sustained reflection and discourse. Now that we've explored a little more about the features and principles of each of these emergent learning theories, let's consider some of the potential real-world application in our classrooms and for our own personal learning strategies. First, let's take a few of the core connectivist principles and consider some real-world applications. Learning is a process of connecting specialized nodes or information sources. Take a broad view of nodes and information sources. Traditionally, we tend to focus on these nodes being human-based: managers, instructors, mentors, peers. We now need to consider all the potential connection sources for learning. Build this process of connecting into learning design from the beginning. For both formal and informal learning programs and interventions, encouraging and facilitating the process of making connections should be part of the consideration from the beginning of the project. This can no longer be only an afterthought or follow-up. The issue is bigger than the classroom. Consider organizational implications. Forging an organization that fosters connection is a job bigger than just the HR, training, or staff development team. Strategy, organizational design, and culture all play a role in creating a connected organization. These concepts need airtime beyond just the classroom. Learning may reside in non-human appliances. Consider all your resources. Again, this goes back to being thoughtful about different nodes and information sources. Tools, systems, networks must be part of the equation when approaching learning. Think about the context and environment. How do people interact with and access these non-human appliances? Are your classrooms, workspaces, and meeting areas optimized to facilitate these interactions? You may want to consider bringing in some human factors or design experts to consider the physical environment and how it may be helping or hindering these interactions. Usability matters. More than ever before, it's critical to consider the usability of the hardware, software, and affordances of the equipment and tools we're providing for your students and employees. Currency. Accurate, up-to-date knowledge is the intent of all connectivist learning activities. How current is current enough? This is an answer we'll need to have a point of view about. For our students and employees to be competitive, we need to understand the currency of knowledge for our fields and industries and ensure our learning strategies are up to the task. What are the implications for traditional instructional systems design processes? The standby ADDIE model, with its in-depth and sometimes lengthy analysis and design phases, may not meet the needs of modern, flexible, and speed-conscious learning. We will need to know when and to what extent we can bypass or at least modify this model, and be aware of the trade-offs that may result. Determine an optimal current to polish ratio. While we can't give up accuracy for speed, we may need to be willing to let go of some of the polish we might prefer to see in our learning materials and programs. More and more of our learning may need to be released in beta mode. Every organization will need to have answers for when and how much of this will be acceptable. When considering community of inquiry, there are also a number of tangible applications that can support our distance learning in online communities. Social presence, storytelling. Sharing stories is one of the oldest forms of human communication. Moving this into the virtual sphere can be a great way to encourage the social element and make distance learning experiences feel more personal. Pictures and videos. Discussions that occur solely via conference calls, email, or discussion forums can feel impersonal at times. Incorporating a video element via tools like Google Hangouts, FaceTime, or Skype can help enhance communication. If video isn't an option, at least posting or sharing pictures can help foster more personal connections. Cognitive presence. Spark conversation. You want to ensure people's brains are fully engaged. Do what you can to really spark good conversation among students, not just idle chat or casual or cursory conversation, but find ways to really get them talking. Stir debate. Orchestrate and encourage healthy debate. Ask people to defend their positions with reasoning and facts. Even ask learners to switch sides on a debate and make the case for the other side of the argument. Teaching presence. Show yourself. Just as students and participants sharing pictures and videos can enhance overall social presence, so too can this approach help to make the instructor feel more human to the students. Sharing biographical information, a picture, a video, recorded podcasts or lectures can all help to lessen the distance and help students feel more of a connection. Stay engaged. This is obviously important for any kind of class or learning interaction, but in an online or distance education experience, it becomes even more critical for the instructor to stay closely connected. Establishing expectations for response and turnaround times and then sticking to it are critical for demonstrating you are involved and engaged in the learning process. Frequent and quality comments in discussion forums and threads are one very visible way to stay in the fray. Finally, I want to spend a couple minutes considering the ever-popular WIFM question, or what's in it for me. As a learning practitioner and a student, what do I have to gain from these two emergent learning theories? How can they support and enhance my own practice? First, let's look at connectivism. While this theory is a little more on the conceptual side, it still presents a number of interesting implications as I think how I might incorporate some of the key principles into what I do every day. At its core, it's a concept of realizing the centrality of connections in our digital world. Whether these are connections between people or networks or other nodes of information, I see myself being much more mindful of how I can begin encouraging and strengthening these connections. Secondly, community of inquiry is much more readily applicable to many of the programs and projects I currently lead. What stands out to me most here is the idea that community itself is not something that just happens, but we must take efforts to nurture it and help it grow among learners, especially through cultivating meaningful social interactions. Regardless of the methods of delivery, the human and social element remains a critical component of learning. And in this way, both connectivism and community of inquiry agree on the critical importance of connection when it comes to learning.